Hello and welcome to this virtual roundtable discussion where we'll be discussing the evolution of customer engagement. This is one of a series of 3 videos looking at the fast pace of change happening right now in the world of customer experience and engagement. The challenges, the opportunities and the future. The videos are sponsored by Vonage and forms the basis of an article in the Future of Marketing and Customer Experience special report published in the Sunday Times. I'm your host, Nick Eason, and I'm delighted to be joined by 5 influential leaders in this space. They are Sunny Rao from Vonage, Mark Smith of Contact Engine, Kat Robinson at Metrobank, Stan Swinton from Deliveroo, and Johannes Schilt from Crew or Livy, the brand name here in the UK. First off, some context. Customer engagement will see a great deal of innovation in 2021 because a lot has happened over the last 12 months with COVID-19 and it's been an acceleration event. Consumers have grown accustomed to communications on their preferred channel, and at the same time, many businesses are going through digital transformation themselves. Data is the new oil in this process. Yet, there are challenges, including siloed approaches, costs of onboarding, and turning data into actionable insights. But with challenges comes opportunities, and as the world recovers and applies the learnings from the past year and shifts to a more digital-first approach, businesses will make important advancements that will set the course for the future of customer engagement. Businesses are now learning to adopt best practices and concepts from other industries and incorporating those ideas into their own operations, from gaming to education, healthcare to banking. So let's start with Sunny Rao from Vonage. Sunny, how do you think customer engagement has changed over the last 12 months for businesses and consumers?
Thanks, Nick. And as you said, it's been a fairly disruptive event. It's become a cliche to say that now. But what has happened is clearly consumer behavior is changing the longer this goes on. And they have been forced to look at what they have to do from within the confines of their home. They have to juggle a job. Work timings are no longer have boundaries. They have kids to look after, homeschooling, and then there's a pandemic to deal with. So with all this disruption, I think consumers are beginning to look at what are the priorities that they have in life, and therefore what is the most important, and try and see how they can do it in the most convenient manner. So when you look at consumer behavior, how that changed after the initial run for toilet paper into the supermarkets, I don't think there is a consumer who's sitting there and saying, I really need to go to the supermarket now after having had a digital experience to say, I just need to buy more toilet paper. Most of that comes as a subscription. And if apps got smarter as they went ahead and they figured out all your culinary delights that you were engaging in and ordering that through Deliveroo, or if you had scheduled a telehealth consultation over Livy and they had that insight, they would know whether the subscription had to be advanced and send you more of that much earlier. So those are some of the things that are happening with consumers as they discover great experiences over brands, and then they expect that same experience with every other brand and service they interact with. So there's this cross-pollination of experiences that is coming in. It is blending an experience on a consumer platform to a business platform. And these changes are creating disruptions for businesses. I can't think over the last year that I've been locked at home over here that I've had to go to a bank, but I do think about how does the bank turn around and handle all my calls? Was that agent really sitting at home? And I would cringe at the fact that the agent was probably laughing and saying, Sunny, look at your bank balance. But I don't know how that would have been handled. So I think this is a good segue for me to ask Kat, what do you think has been your experience with Metrobank and how you've handled it over the course of the last year?
I think so. We've absolutely seen a huge shift to customers using telephony and online services, very much actually at points encouraged by us. I mean, whilst we were sort of at birth, if you like, kind of very store-based, a very physical presence. Clearly, we've had to actively encourage our customers to use other channels, and they have. We've seen a massive spike in both digital and call centre demand in that time. And absolutely, some of our agents have been based at home, as you suggested, Sunny. But I think it's interesting for me how much of that behaviour will stick and how much won't. So I think some of it will. So my mother is always my kind of case study here. So my mum is finally into, it's not a Metro account actually, with regret, but into her banking app and doing kind of simple transactions and queries there now, and happy to, so she won't go back to doing those in telephony or kind of going into a store to do those. Whereas I do think there are other kinds of more complex transactions or kind of those big kind of moments of truth where people have tried to do them remotely, but it's felt less comfortable, or people have maybe put things off, that I think will go back to physical. I mean, again, a non-banking example, but if I think about my own, clothes shopping habits, I've done it all online, but I can't wait to be able to go into a shop to kind of touch and feel things for certain types of purchases, not for everything, but for some things. So I think it'll be interesting to see if and what flows back. I absolutely agree with you, not all of it will, but I suspect some of it will.
And turning to you, Johannes, in terms of what's happened from Clu's perspective, Livy's perspective, and how things have evolved over the last 12 months, what have you been seeing in terms of patient engagement?
Yeah, no, it's definitely been an accelerator, but the mega trend was obviously there long before the pandemic. Our entry point into healthcare have always been from the consumers, from the patient's perspective, and it's just very obvious for me as a patient that I can order my food on Deliveroo, but I have to call a landline early in the morning and travel long distances to meet the GP. Like, why shouldn't I be able to do that on the comfort of my home? And I think that frustration from patients have been there for a long time, but obviously the pandemic have accelerated that shift, where now a lot more people across Europe and the world have experienced that digital healthcare is here to stay, and it can solve a real problem, and it's way more convenient versus traveling and then sitting in a waiting room.
That makes a lot of sense. And throwing over to you, Stan. I think you've been saying that good is not good enough anymore. We need companies that need to be great, and I think that's a good segue into what you've been seeing with Deliveroo, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I would concur with my colleagues here that really what we've seen is living without moving has become a lifestyle choice. And, that's going to have to be something that companies facilitate going forward. It doesn't mean that will be how people choose to live their lives, but they want the option. So whether I go back in a couple of days to work a week or whether I want to stay at home, that's my choice. And I need to have the convenience of healthcare, banking, food delivery at my fingertips. So for me, that's kind of been the really big shift and change. I don't think we're going to lose that as an option for consumers. We just need to facilitate that. I think the other thing that's changed is customers have seen that companies, when forced to do so, can change on a dime. They can change extremely quickly and adapt to their needs. And so the standard and the expectation has shifted. And we've seen that in a lot of studies across the globe around customer sentiment, and industry benchmarks have been falling over the last 12 months. And it's been a really interesting trend to watch. From my perspective, it's because customers now, if something doesn't work, they expect it to get fixed. They don't expect that to take 6 months for a company to fix a problem in the app or an issue with a user experience. They expect to see it fixed now.
That makes a lot of sense. And turning to Mark from Contact Engine, you've been talking about, brands were, potentially more reactive before the pandemic and so forth, and the move towards more proactive communications. Could you tell me what you're seeing from your point of view, Mark?
Yeah, we still live in a reactive world. There are surveys only recently carried out by Gartner that suggest that 90% of customer engagements with brand is reactive, and half of those are people who have a problem that want it resolved. So for me, the last 12 months, I think the world's, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the world's become nicer in that period. I think I certainly know neighbors. I've lived where I've lived for a long time, and I've met neighbors for the first time in the last 12 months, which perhaps says something about me, but also says something about the fact I was often not there. But also, I think the immediacy of your engagements with people has been very important for us over the last 12 months. I was very nervous when this kicked off that the whole telco network would collapse. That's what I thought might happen. Okay, the sheer volume of stuff, particularly as we shifted into video conferencing en masse, and thank goodness companies like Vonage and others have allowed us to do that very easily. But I think if you're going to truly carry on with this, and this is, I think it's another cliche, but it's a new normal, right? They reckon in the US, 4% of people working from home before the pandemic and 35% will be afterwards. This is the new normal. I've surveyed my staff. They do not want to go back to an office. They are working all over the world and they are hugely more productive as a consequence. But brands have got to be proactive, and you can only do that with machines. It's self-serving, but it's true.
And so throwing forwards, and you kind of started to touch on these things, and back to Sunny, what do you think are the challenges and issues? You know, we've talked about, you know, that we've set the scene for what we're seeing. What do you think are the challenges and issues if we have this new era in terms of, you know, expectations and so forth? What do you think are the challenges and issues of this new era of customer engagement? What do you think, Sunny?
I think consumers are going to react very quickly to say that there are certain basic necessities, the staples, if you want to call it, that they just expect to be delivered to them in some shape or form proactively. And there is going to be that expectation. So when they actually have a service deficiency that they want to talk about, it's going to be a highly complex issue that requires a significant dose of empathy, as Mark was saying, when they actually get to that human being, because it is no longer trivial. And so this expectation starts to get baked into the every experience they have, which is, why don't things just come to me? And we've had that today, right? If you look at our consumption patterns, that's what's happening. Entertainment gets delivered to the home. You know, I would cringe at the fact that going over to the cinemas and having to queue up and buy a ticket and go in and sit there when I have that flexibility to watch what I want, pause when I want, and make myself that popcorn. So, you know, you're going to have everything delivered to your home. And what has happened over the last 12, 15 months is even your doctor is now home, like Crew is doing, where the doctor turns up in virtual form into your home, food gets delivered to you, e-commerce shopping gets delivered to you. So there's going to be some basic expectations that's going to change the way people live. People will go out into the suburbs because they'll be happier to do that. They don't have to commute to work every day. They don't have to be near a hospital as you get more diagnostics and point of care devices, you know, that become affordable inside the home to monitor your health. You got great service delivery for food. So that expectation gets built in. So how do you build an organization that leverages the data and the buying behavior and consumption behavior of your consumers to deliver on an increasingly new benchmark of service delivery, to keep doing that? And then how do you train your people for that eruption, which is going to be really volcanic in a way, when there is a complex issue and the customer does reach out to you? So I think those are some of the shifts that are going to happen, and these are going to happen across channels. Consumption happens on one kind of access channel. The complex resolution will have on a different channel. So how do you get a complete view of what's happening with your consumers? I think these are going to be the challenges that businesses are going to have to deal with.
And that's a good segue into Metro Bank, because, you know, as physical banks reopen, and you've got, you know, you're looking at that continuum where both you've got physical store, you know, physical banks, and you've also got the online, you know, that's going to create new challenges and issues with this customer engagement, you know, like, you know, an omni-channel understanding and engagement with the customer, right? Kat, could you sort of elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, no, agree. So I think, yeah, two sort of challenges for us. I think one will be, as you said, it's almost ensuring a consistent level of kind of experience for customers across all of our channels, for us and for other businesses, I think, with a physical and digital presence. So, you know, I'm not a Metro Bank mobile customer or a Metro Bank store customer. I am a Metro Bank customer. So I think customers increasingly impatient if the experience their experience across the different channels varies. Then the build on that, I think, actually, to Sunny's point, would just be, if I choose to go physical, if I use that term, then actually it's got to be amazing, because I can probably do it at home. I'm used to doing it at home. It's easier for me to do it at home. So if I'm going to go in and see you, it's either because it's a real moment of truth for me. So it's something where I'm really looking for empathy. You know, I don't know, my mum's died and I feel that requires a face-to-face visit, or I'm going in to open something and I expect a really seamless amazing experience in store. Otherwise, why wouldn't I have done it at home? So I think expectations of the physical, if that makes sense, will increase because you can do it yourself, you know, in your pajamas on your sofa.
And I'm bringing in Johannes, you know, with what you're doing in digital healthcare, especially with what's happened with the pandemic and access to healthcare. That's created an evolution, right, in terms of expectations within healthcare, right? Or could you expand on that for us, Johannes?
Yeah, no, most definitely. And you mentioned challenges, and I think one of our main challenges to guarantee a great consumer experience and patient experience is that, you know, we want to make sure that everyone can access our services, right? And one of our challenges is that healthcare by tradition is very localized, and with digital healthcare, it's not localized. Like you should in theory be able to access our services all across the nation. So in the UK, for example, we have 5 million people that are covered by our NHS offering, and they can access the services for free. And for the rest of the population, that doesn't really make any sense. It's just sort of a postcode lottery where if you can access it or not. And I think that is one of our challenges, that healthcare by tradition is structured very, very regional. So it's built upon the sort of like you have physical locations and you serve people that are close to those locations, but that's not how digital healthcare works. So that is definitely a challenge for us.
That's a fantastic note on which to end this video. Thank you very much to all our speakers for a fascinating discussion. I certainly learnt a lot. Please do click through to the other 2 videos in this series where we'll be discussing opportunities and the future of customer engagement. Thank you for watching.